So I'll be talking about onboarding that clicks today. It's basically something that I've been focusing on for the past 20 years or so. I started thinking about this long way back when I was looking at games, how they onboard people, how they get people engaged in the product, and basically from friction to flow, how do we get the user to directly engage with the application? And I want to think about onboarding as something that isn't just the first 5 minutes or the first day of interaction with the product and teaching the user how to use the product, but it's more so the entire life cycle of the application. So before we, which one do I click? Sorry.
Where's the...
Oh, I can use my mouse. It's all right, I'll use my mouse. Sorry about that. So before we get started, I just want to ground us all in the same understanding of what onboarding is. It's the design path that turns first-time participants into successful repeat users across a product's lifetime. Now, with that said, we want to look at the same app, two different propositions. We have app 1 and app 2, the traditional method of looking at a consuming sign-up, very, very heavy ask right from the go. And sorry, does the clicker work now? No. All right. And then you're met with an empty dashboard. There's no proof. There's a lot of configuration that needs to be done before you can actually see anything on the screen. And then you go to the third moment where you have no real success, you have low confidence, and there is a lower chance of a day 2 visit of the product. Whereas in the second proposition, you have sample data when you arrive, you see everything right away, it's safe to try, and you learn by doing, and to get the first good result, you just need a few steps, like 3-5 steps to get something done, to get a first quick win in the application. You have, of course, the clear success, and then afterwards the user is directly asked to do something after that. There's a well-known guy, Steve Jobs from Apple, who encapsulates the customer experience being the foundation. You've got to start with the customer experience and work backward to the technology. A little bit about myself first, since a lot of people here don't know me. I've been living in Stavanger for about 2 years. I come from Sweden. I've lived in a bunch of countries. I moved to New Zealand. Then I moved to Norway. I met my wife in Thailand. She's from New Zealand. We got a baby. We moved to New Zealand, got married in New Zealand. We bought a house in Norway, got another baby in Norway, and most importantly, we got a cat. In my early years, as the design of my template here kind of indicates, I am very much into, well, I have been very much into games. I started off building games and services for games early on, roughly 25 years ago. The first project I did was a site called gamers.nu, which was a site for Counter-Strike, which some of you guys might know of. Peaked at about 250,000 users. And then I ventured on into basically creating my own projects and delved into marketing and all kinds of ventures. Later on, I joined Soprasteria in Stavanger. Currently, I'm at Sokkeldirektoratet, the oil directorate. And in the meantime, I've also been building about 14 apps or so. Been a huge advocate for React in general. And yeah, I'm not really a developer. I'm more so a service designer, UX designer, and currently, in my capacity, also a functional architect. With that said, today's journey, we're going to be looking at games as pioneers. We're going to be looking at diagnostic models. and the long and short term of onboarding and how to get onboarding right, as well as case studies. Now, when we get to this part, I think that a lot of people here already know what I'm about to show, this iconic curtains. You might be wondering, why am I showing Super Mario at HelloStavanger, and I'm talking about onboarding? Well, actually, a long time ago, about 40 years ago, when Nintendo were looking for a hallmark product to drive the sales of their console, they were also thinking about, okay, we need a game that actually sticks out, something that drives the sales really, really hard. And you might be thinking, okay, so what are you looking for in the first screen when you start playing? How do we onboard a user? Do we just post instructions, jump with this button? This is the foe. This is a power-up. Or do you actually introduce the player into a safe space where they can try and try again? You introduce your hero, you introduce the foe, and you show off the rewards you can get, as well as the power-ups. Here, the player can try and try and try again, and fail as many times as they need, but ultimately, all they need to know to play the game from start to finish is displayed in on this screen, in this little bit. Then we have early rewards. So basically, games do this really well. They have a progression, a path, where they take the user through a guided system. Where do you get if you go down, if you go downwards, if you go sideways, and so on? You can think of this as essentially roles in an application. Are you administrator, are you support, or something else? Basically guided paths. And it reinforces success and builds momentum. It uses a clear visual cue to make progress feel very tangible. And of course, it lays out a clear roadmap of future skills and features. Then we have tooltips. This is from a game called Diablo. Now, I think most people here know that tooltips are generally like an afterthought when you're developing products. You hover over an info button or something, and you get some very, very minimal information about what the function of that feature is. However, in games, they've taken it a step further. So, for example, they use color and icons to highlight key information. They clearly show requirements and progress, and they embed relevant actions and shortcuts into the tooltip, as you can see with the buttons there. Then we have in-context learning. So the hero approaches and halt, the gate is locked. What do you need? You need a blue key. So basically, these are tips at the exact moment of need. It guides the users in a single and clear direction. Basically, don't go too far into the product. You need to learn a few things. You need to get a stronger foundation, and so on. Then, identity from the start. Games have perfected this. I created this very handsome character. It's something that a lot of games have focused quite heavily on in the past. And basically what it does is it shows a live preview of you as you choose a role, and it makes the account so personal and valuable. Once you create something like this, you've already invested a lot of time. You feel like you have this personal connection with the product, and it becomes easier for the user to remember the account, and they likely come back again. Now, why are games ahead? So there are clear win states. It's pretty easy for a game to tell the story of, okay, you're going here, this is the goal currently, maybe the goal expands, and it becomes more interesting over time. They have safe failure environments, so you can try and try again. Usually you know that if you die in a game, you can start over, you maybe go a few steps back, but you don't have to worry too much. And then, of course, telemetry and tuning culture for the first-time user experience gets balanced. So let's say, for example, that you have a boss, and through telemetry, you know that 70% of players fail at a very early stage. you can tune the boss by basically making the boss easier, and therefore you also get more successful players and more playability. Difficulty curves, so basically challenge goes up and up and up as you progress, because obviously you get better and better and better at the game as time goes on. So is onboarding always needed? Well, I mean, we're going to go to the, we're going to look at three key decisions you're going to look at, and it's going to basically end you with the else factor. So decision one is, do you need critical info, like KYC or compliance? If you're a fintech product, for example, you obviously cannot skip these parts. You need a purposeful onboarding. However, if you have a novel or complex interaction, or an application in general, maybe you need contextual onboarding because the product is not so intuitive, because maybe the users are not expected to have seen this before. Else, improve base UI. You can always teach the user a lot about the product just by showing a good first screen. So, with that said, avoid generic walkthroughs, use onboarding only when it unlocks value, and let the first screen do the teaching. And now, we're going to look at diagnostic models. So, as the subtitle says, use, don't worship. I think models are really good to look at, but generally speaking, they're just a guiding tool. I think of them as something where I just want to get my mindset in the direction that is proven. So we're going to look at the fog behavior model first and foremost. This is a model that is used mostly for single interactions. So you can think of it as, okay, I don't get a lot of users who are clicking this specific button. Why is that? So you can use this model when you're asking, why aren't users performing this one specific action now? And it all goes to the motivation, the ability, and the prompt, the B equals map. So if, for example, the motivation is high, but you still fail, you can look at the ability. Are we asking too much of the user at this specific moment? Is it a questionnaire with 10 different questions? Could we break it down into 5 questions and then prompt the user for another 5 questions later on? It could very well be that there is a, that you can go above the action line just by asking yourself the right question. Then we have the COM-B model, which is essentially a model that I use when I think of a product as a whole, and I'm thinking of many, many different steps, but something fails. So you have the capability, which is the knowledge gap. So you have a, you have to ask yourself, does the user actually know what is what they're supposed to do to proceed? And the environment gap under opportunity. Is the user able to do the task that they're supposed to perform? Can they upload the CSV file, as an example? When those 2 criteria have been met, you reach the motivation part, and from the motivation part, you have the behavior. Then we have the adoption curve. Now, this one is looking a little bit more into the total life cycle of a product, so it's not really specifically going into a single action, but more so what type of users are we looking at. Early on, you have the innovators. They will be happy to test anything because they want to be the first. And usually when you're thinking about this, you can think of it as a time axis, where the earliest stages of the product, they're obviously not as, it's obviously not going to be as developed as the mature product that has been on the market for several years. So the innovators are happy to try this, followed by early adopters. You can think of these as leaders, as people who just want to be there very, very early on. This is a slightly larger segment of the audience. And the early majority, they need some proof. They need to have it verified that, okay, there is some market shift. Some people are moving to this. There's a maturity in this product. And you have the late majority, and they want to make sure that there is great onboarding, great support, and changes don't happen as frequently as they do early on in the life cycle of a product. And of course, you have the laggards. These are the people that are die-hard, not changing the application until something fails, that support has ended, that the company behind the part that you're using has gone bankrupt. Now, all this to say that all these different types of cycles throughout the product require different things from the onboarding. When behavior is easy, we need less motivation to do it. Make the desired new behavior easy and you will be more likely to repeat it. In essence, remove any potential friction. That's Fogg, the behavior scientist at Stanford who is behind this Fogg behavior model. Next up, we're going to be looking at onboarding done right. So it's designing every step from hello to habit so value shows up early and is compounding over time. So I want to split this into two different products. Two different types of onboarding. We have the digital and we have the customer onboarding. You can think of it as the short term or the long term, the sprint or the marathon. You have the arrival, you have the aha moment, and the aha moment is when the user realizes the value of the product. Aha, okay, great, and that's the success. And then you have the longer version, which is the setup. You need a lot of different things, a lot of different moving parts to set up in the product to facilitate the needs of the customer. And then you have the first project, and then over time you enable the users of this project to become better and more proficient and learn to love the tool. Now, when we're designing the first win, it's very important that we reduce the empty states in an app and we populate the surfaces. So the user is welcomed with, so basically we let them have the quick win, where they can do something quick under 5 minutes, and basically learn by doing, explain the app quickly. And then we have a guided path where we have like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 actions, something sensible with pre-filled fields. You don't want to have an empty dashboard. Again, sandbox environment. It's very important to be able to have a risk-free environment, give the users some chances to try. Don't force big consequences when you're trying out the app. And of course, there's the you did it, and guide the user into the next action. Not mandatory, but as an option. Now, this to say that an example of this would be report created, this looks great, invite a teammate. That's when you have the motivation of the user to ask them to have it done. Now, I've been thinking about the long-term onboarding experience. I didn't want to select a specific product for this presentation, so we're kind of in a vacuum here with a product that is unspecified. So the examples will be generic, but I have split it up into a sort of blueprint where we can think of it as me, the team, and the ecosystem and data. In the first step, we're looking at what has happened early on in the product, the aha moment, where you have the first win. You're very much encouraged to invite people to the application, so you see the adoption. This is the cooperation of the gaming world. And then you have the quick connector, so basically you can integrate something. You can use the aha moment to maybe import a CSV file or what have you, and build on the aha moment, on the experience. And then you can go on and you can add micro modules and quests. You can do role-based learning, so you can do sandbox and practice. Now this is where I added a little infinity symbol, meaning that this is something that can go on and on and on throughout, well, in perpetuity throughout the entire lifetime of the application. You can always onboard people continuously throughout time with sandbox environments. Moving on, we can add more things like opportunity raters, so this can go on endlessly as well. Feature Y, after doing action X, other users are using it this way, basically. This is a great way of getting people to use your product in different ways based on the majority. Then you have life cycle enablement, so you have seasonal challenges or options or features that are coming up, very much so needed for complex products that have that have reached maturity. You have use case change logs, which could be personalized feed of release notes mapped to your role and workflows. I also want to mention the what's new demos. It's something that I'm going to demonstrate a little bit later in a use case. But basically, don't do static patch notes, is what I want to say. There are so many different types of onboarding principles, systems that you can integrate into a product with a long life cycle, where users are constantly being, well, not bombarded, but triggered to do something new, to discover new features in your app and learn something new and become better and more proficient, and thereby sticking with your app over time. I've added a few more here. Then we're going to look at the modern toolkit. So give the right help at the right time. Personalize lightly. So let's say, for example, you've all seen this. When you're signing up and you're being asked a few questions, you can always steer the application in a slightly different path, depending on the user. Are you into baking? Are you into sales? Are you into this and that? All these things can take you down a different path, and you can sort of figure out what kind of user are you expecting, and what do they want to see when they are past this phase. Then you have the gradual engagement, so let people try it before they sign up. Very often, a product where you enter a website, you don't want to just force the user to sign up before they can try anything. Use a sandbox environment. Let them play around a little bit. Micromodules, so quick do-it-yourself steps, and of course, make sure that the application remembers what you've been doing. And progress visibility, now I wrote here, begin with a head start. So basically, there's a principle in this type of behavior psychology where you can do a progress bar. You don't start at 1% or 0%. You can start at 20, 25%. And what it does is it triggers the user to say, okay, well, maybe I should complete this one. I don't want to leave it at at 25%. You can cheat a little bit by saying, for example, if it's a sign-up form with 10 items, you can use the SSO login details, like the name and the email address and so on, and use that as the foundation for the 25%. Of course, the sandbox environment where and resource center, where it's very important to make sure that the help is always one click away and a safe place to practice with sample data. Essentially, make the user stay on your website as much as possible without having to use Google to exit the product to find out anything. Now, gamification that works, cosmetic badges. Make sure you only reward those when they're actually earned, and so that they feel valuable. Don't spam these things. Forced tours and pop-up nags. Very important that you do it in the context of things when it's actually necessary for the user to see this. Feature launches, so mini demos with sample content. Don't do static patch notes. And then we have notifications and nudges. Basically, only when it's necessary for the user to have this in front of them. Don't blast this out when on a schedule, because then it's going to be interpreted pretty much like the spam you get in your inbox. We're going to have a quick look at case studies. So we're going to look at products that did it well, first and foremost. And the first use case is going to be Adobe. So this is the patch notes that I've been talking about, where you're basically introducing new features in the product in a very, very functional way to the user. You don't drop a list of this is new, this is new, this is new, this is new. You let them actually try it. So we have a CTA here, try it now. You click it. What happens? Well, you get a Photoshop file opened right away, and with steps telling you how do I achieve the result in the preview that you saw before. This made me use the new features, learn the new features to a much higher extent than before when it was just patch notes. Moving on, Miro. Most of you are familiar with this one. They have done an absolutely amazing job with the templates. Now, if they hadn't had templates, the user would go into a pretty naked experience, essentially, where you have to discover everything on your own. You add a box here, you draw an arrow to another box, and where do you go from there? Now, with this one, you choose, for example, a blueprint here. You go for a goal setting OKR. You see a video. You see a bunch of information as you scroll down. What's in this? What is it used for? And so on. And last but not least, you see the contents of this space and all the boards that it includes. Squarespace, they did a fantastic sign-up process where they have a few very simple steps where you're basically getting the quick win right away. You're doing it as fast as possible just so you can have a quick little website. It's very visual. I want to have an orange website. And then you're taken to your first win, and from there you have the progression that we've been talking about, where you can quickly isolate, okay, I want to stylize my site. I want to add my company logo right away. Moving on, case studies for products that did not so well. The first one is going to be from Microsoft. I've been using the Azure platform quite frequently for the last few years. In my example, I've taken some steps to basically document how many steps do I need to take as a new user to get English text to translate to Norwegian and output that in a speech-to-text. That's how many steps it takes. Google, AI Studio. So fantastic tool for those that use it. However, the user interface has not matured sufficiently. Now, for example, structured outputs. What do you expect when you hover over this one? Well, certainly not generate structured outputs. There are more examples of this. URL context, browse the URL context. Temperature, creativity allowed in the responses. These are the types of things where if they had used the example I showed you from Diablo 4, where they add a lot of cool information, a lot of different colors and icons and whatnot, you could have so many interesting things to teach the user, to get them engaged and play around and be creative. Instead, we end up with these kind of things. Then for this example, this is the guided tour. So it's the Bootstrap tour that I used here because I didn't want to single out a specific product. But you've seen this before. Basically, all the millions of steps when you're clicking next, 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 next. I haven't met a single person who's actually followed these from start to finish. The reason it doesn't work really well is because the user needs, from my point of view, a sandbox environment or some trials before they actually understand what am I looking at? Why do I want to click here? Why do I want to create a new, why do I want to click the create button, for example? So onboarding is not a one-time event. It is a continuous conversation by Nir Eyal, who is a behavioral engineer and author. Great guy if you ever want to buy his book. And with that said, I just want to say thank you so much for listening, and looking forward to hear more speeches and speaking to some of you. Thank you.